elitism is selling out in midair. It's just done. I think the world is kind of done with the whole like expert class, elite class thing. I think COVID was a big canary in the coal mine to this. I think the Douglas Murray, Dave Smith debate is a big indicator of this. And I think that common sense is making a comeback. And people are like, I don't want like a 17-page white paper on why like I shouldn't get my 17th or why I should get my 17th COVID shot. I'm just not going to get my 17th COVID shot. Like whatever the scenario is. I don't need like a foreign policy document from like the American Enterprise Institute to know that like bombing kids in either Israel or Gaza is a bad thing. I just know that's a bad thing. So I want to say another example of this that I thought that was really telling and one that I witnessed personally. So this is actually hilarious because it connects to Douglas Murray. One of Douglas Murray's good friends is a gentleman by the name of Neil Ferguson, if you guys know who Neil Ferguson is. So Neil Ferguson, for those who don't know, is what Douglas Murray would call a quote-unquote actual historian. He's someone who is like classically trained in history and he knows like facts or whatever. And so he is another one of the quote-unquote experts that Douglas Murray was referring to. And he is on the advisory board for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or ARC, which is Jordan Peterson's organization. It's kind of a counter worldwide economic forum. And I was at the ARC conference in London. I saw Neil Ferguson speak several times. He gave a keynote. He was on a couple panels. And, what I thought was amazing, and I think the biggest takeaway that I learned from being over there is that the European sense of America, like all of Europe wants to be America, but when it comes down to actually doing things that America does, they don't want to do anything. I think the cognitive dissonance there is just hysterical. I think it's so funny. I talked to my dad about this too. He travels far more than I do. He's in Europe a lot. He's actually worked for a British company for a long time, and so all of his superiors and the people that worked under him were mostly British. And he said the exact same thing. He's like, you just think that Europe is so in the toilet. They want to be in America, but they don't want to do the things that Americans do to be America, sort of thing. And so Neil Ferguson was giving a talk at the ARC conference, and he made a point about Doge. And so he was making a point about Doge, and Neil Ferguson is a neocon, so he is for every foreign intervention, every foreign war, all that sort of thing. And so he has cheer-led every conflict that has been huge inside of the world for the longest time, for the entirety of my life, for certain. All the wars in the Middle East, and he was really big on the war in Ukraine because he's of this kind of like post-Cold War, like Crusader, St. George and retirement syndrome thing is like, well, if Putin expands back to he's Scottish, so I don't even know how to do a Scottish accent, but if Putin goes back to the West one more inch, then we're going to reconstitute the Soviet. And I'm like, okay, like, I mean, fine, whatever. And so, but he made a point about Doge when Doge was really, really up and kicking. This is back in February. And so this is, I think, right as USAID was getting shut down and all those things. So while Doge, in his view, was apparently doing a quote-unquote great job, that the United States needs to spend more money on the military than what it currently is. And we have an over $800 billion military budget. And he made this point about like, well, whenever the military spending of a country is less than the debt, that we need to, that the country goes in decline. And so essentially, we need to combat the national debt, we just need to make more ballistic missiles to shoot people in Ukraine and Russia with, apparently. That was his argument. And so he used that to take a shot at America's quote-unquote negligence towards Ukraine. He used it to take a shot at Trump and a shot at J.D. Vance and a shot at all these people. And what I love a lot about the people that are currently in the Trump administration is they're not afraid to like get into it with people. Like they don't have like the political decorum. So JD, you can look this up. J.D. Vance took issue with this. And J.D. Vance just added he just took that clip from Neil Ferguson and quoted it and did like a 2,000 word response to it. It was awesome. And so JD just, again, he takes the nerd, he stuffs his head in the toilet, and he just puts Neil Ferguson through a wall. And he called it like moralistic garbage. He called Ferguson a globalist, both of which were true, because he essentially said like, look, dude, you have shit the bed on every single one of these issues. You have not been right on a single gosh darn thing that you have done throughout your entire life. Like, you're wrong about everything. So why we're considering you an expert, I have no idea. And so he just basically told him, he's like, dude, sit back, sit down, shut up. Like, let the big boys come in and take care of this thing, because and essentially what he said is like, look, these people are unserious. These people are stupid. Their ideas have done nothing but stall out in midair and fail for generations. And then Neil Ferguson, who has never had anyone talk to him like that in the history of everything because he's like a quote-unquote expert or whatever, he goes on Substack and writes this thing about like in response to J.D. Vance or whatever he says. And he says all these things. And so he does what nerds do. He goes back and like writes a paper about like how offended he is that J.D. Vance called him out at his BS finally. And so I think this illustration, if piggybacking off the Dave Smith, Douglas Murray thing, and then going into the Neil Ferguson, J.D. Vance thing, the reason why elitism fails is inside of both of these arguments, both of these kerfuffles that we got into on social media. The reason why elitism fails is that it gets too high and mighty for itself. It's Icarus. It flies way too close to the sun. So it gets way high up there. And then it gets way up there. It just can't see the ground anymore. It can't see the forest through the trees. And again, I'm going to bring this point up and I'm going to hammer it. And people hated that video when I made it about atheistic conservatism because I'm going to hammer it again here. It is no surprise that in that the two men in both of these discussions, that Ferguson is an atheist and J.D. Vance is a Catholic. He is a Christian. Because the Bible is about common sense wisdom, not elevated elitism. In fact, the Bible hates elites. They hated the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the elites. They were the intellectual chattering class in the culture. And Jesus put them through a wall and stuffed their head in a toilet every single time that they tried to take out Jesus. And again, going back to the Dave Smith, Douglas Murray thing, it is not a shock to me at all that Douglas Murray is an atheistic conservative and that Dave Smith is a Christian. It's not a surprise to me at all because the Bible is about common sense. It is about wisdom. It is not about intelligence. It is not about elitism. And this is why they cannot coexist because elitism, for all of the quote-unquote conservatives out there, elitism is inherently a progressive concept. It's not conservative at all to be an elitist. Any elitist is not a conservative. They're a liberal or a libertarian or a progressive. Because to think that you are above a conversation, that you're above a person, that a person should, kowtow to you and your ideas, there's nothing more progressive than that. We saw this with everything with all the leftist craziness in America for the last decade. Because when you debase yourself, as Neil Ferguson did, as Douglas Murray did, as so many other people have done, from what is the truth and from what is common sense, you end up alienating everything that is constructive and positive about your philosophy on life, which is why elitism always fails. Elitism always fails because it believes that it can exist outside of the realm of common sense, which is a ridiculous idea. That's a ridiculous idea because common sense, gravity, the laws of physics, when you shoot someone in the head, they're probably going to die. All those types of things. You cannot think your way out of that scenario. You cannot think your way out of all of these things. You can't think your way out of wisdom. You can't think your way out of wisdom. Wisdom always beats intelligence every single time. It's the reason why, by the way, I'll throw myself on the spike here. Every time I've tried, I had a tweet about this or an X post, whatever we're calling it now, about this the other day. This is the reason why whenever I try to like quote unquote outsmart or outthink my parents, I get slapped around by my parents. Not literally, my parents don't hit me. Even now I'm 27. If they hit me, that'd probably be a concern. But they slap me around with their wisdom because my parents are wise and I'm not. Am I smarter than I don't even think I'm smarter than my parents. I'm certainly not wiser than my parents. That's a completely stupid idea. That's a completely ridiculous idea to think on its face. So the reason that elitism will never outpace wisdom is that elitism isn't wise. It never is. Intelligence isn't wise. And the people that don't understand that are the people that are losing now. So we are going into, hopefully, an era that is defined by wisdom, not an era that is simply defined by elite intelligence.